My name is Brianna Mabi. I'm so pleased to run the Women, Peace and Security program at the Kroc Institute for Peace and Justice at the University of San Diego. And I'm so excited to welcome you all today to learn about this new report and to hear from our authors about women-led peacebuilding from the diaspora. So the work we do at the Kroc IBJ is centered on co-creating learning with peacemakers, learning that is deeply grounded in the lived experience of peacemakers around the world, that is made rigorous within our place within a university ecosystem, and is practically applied by peacemakers to end cycles of violence. Today, we're presenting a report created through our Women PeaceMakers program, and you're going to get to hear from 3 amazing fellows. Since 2002, the Kroc IBJ has hosted the Women PeaceMakers Fellowship Program. The fellowship offers a unique opportunity for peacebuilders who focus on issues of gender, peace, and conflict to engage in a cycle of learning, practice, research, and participation that strengthens peacebuilding partnerships. The Women PeaceMakers Fellowship facilitates impactful collaborations between peacebuilders from conflict-affected communities and international partner organizations. The fellows also co-create research intended to shape the peacebuilding field and highlight good practices for peacebuilding design and implementation, which is exactly why we're all here together today. This report we're talking about today was created by our 2023 through 2024 Women Peacemaker Fellows. We wanted to focus on diaspora peacebuilding because it was such a common theme for many of our partners around the world. Diaspora communities have long played critical roles in peacebuilding efforts in their countries of origin, but we know that contributions of women within these communities are significantly underexplored and underappreciated. This report seeks to address this gap by focusing on the unique roles, challenges, and contributions of women in diaspora-led peacebuilding initiatives. Women in the diaspora, often navigating complex identities, facing distinct challenges, are vital actors in promoting peace, reconciliation, and social change in their homelands. The report identifies several key findings. First, it highlights a significant research gap in the study of women-led diaspora peacebuilding, particularly regarding how intersecting identities such as gender, age, and immigration status shape their contributions. Second, the report underscores the complex challenges these women face, including safety concerns, online and offline threats of violence, lack of funding, time scarcity, and entrenched patriarchal norms that hinder their ability to engage fully. Third, despite these challenges, diaspora women employ a range of innovative strategies to contribute to peacebuilding. They engage in advocacy, lead mobilization and grassroots initiatives, document human rights violations, and use digital platforms to raise awareness and build international support. Their visions for peace and for the future are deeply informed by their experiences as diaspora members. Many had engaged in activism in their homelands, and some have experienced being a refugee, an asylum seeker, or in exile. These leaders envision peace not only as the absence of violence, but as a nurturing environment for all people, including women and girls, by emphasizing inclusive governance, justice, and social well-being. This work would not be possible without the partnership of my colleagues at the IPJ, but also wonderful international partners. So as part of our program, each fellow is assigned to an international partner who serves like an advisor for our research. And for this report, I want to thank Jennifer Freeman, who's with us here today, Ivana Milojevic, and Jessica Anania for their amazing guidance and support throughout this year. I'm going to turn it over to Jennifer Freeman in just a moment. I'll give her a quick introduction. Thank you so much for being with us, Jennifer. Jennifer Freeman joined PeaceGeeks as its new CEO in April 2020. Her origins in peacebuilding began 18 years ago, where her work has spanned into conflict zones, refugee resettlements, nonprofits, universities, and working with peacebuilders from over 55 countries. Jen has been at the forefront of developing strategic initiatives and public-private partnerships that leverage technology to enhance the safety, security, and agency of peacebuilders in Canada, Jordan, and around the world. Welcome, Jen. Thank you so much for being with us. And she'll be giving us some opening remarks.
Thank you so much, Brianna, and thank you for the IPJ and the Kroc School and USD for inviting me back and giving me the opportunity to speak with you all today on the launch of this important report and the opportunity to support the incredible work that the Peacebuilders this year are doing. So this week, it's an auspicious week for us to be, for you to be launching the report as the world is celebrating the 25th anniversary of UN Security Council Resolution 1325. The UNSCR 1325 was historic for a number of reasons, which to me link very much to the value of this report. First and foremost, it was created not by member states alone, but with the significant contributions of civil society, including women in conflict zones, transnational women's movements, and including many peace builders in diaspora communities around the world. And not only did the resolution change the framing and narrative at an international policy level of women from victims to active agents in peacebuilding and security processes around the world, but its passage within the Security Council made the resolution binding to all member states. The resolution and the resultant Women, Peace and Security agenda is largely credited with changing not only the policy at the United Nations, integrating many more women into security and peacebuilding forces at the UN. Since 2000, when the resolution was passed, we now have 40% of justice and correction personnels are now women. We have 31% of individual police officers, 23% of military experts. But it's also had ripple effects across justice, across other resolutions that the UN has passed. There is now an increased representation of women in the judiciary. 44% now of positions in international and regional bodies linked to international law are held by women. And UN resolutions are more likely to include provisions for women as actors, acknowledging also the differential effects of violence on women. Of 61 UN Security Council, General Assembly resolutions on disarmament and weapons issues, 23 of those resolutions now recognize the gender dimension of weapons or call for involving women equally in disarmament, non-proliferation, and arms control processes. I could go on, but these are some very concrete achievements that the agenda has had over the last 25 years. And yet each of the women who are here with us today can attest to how quickly women's rights can also be stripped away. We're seeing backsliding across the board. And I think as you know, to give an example that's quite close to home for the speakers we have with us today, in just 4 years since the Taliban came to power, they have removed every women judge in Afghanistan since they came in 2021. Today, my role is running a technology nonprofit that looks at how emerging technologies like generative AI can be used both ethically and effectively in humanitarian emergencies and to support people who have been forcibly displaced or had to migrate around the world. So as part of that work, I work very closely with newcomers, speaking with people who've been forcibly displaced, refugees, asylum seekers, other newcomers, and diaspora communities, including a national network of activists in exile. And I hear many common experiences. To leave is often a matter of survival. Yet starting or continuing work, human rights or peace-building work in exile, often brings with it a myriad of new challenges, some which could be anticipated, some which seem to catch people off guard, again, because the decision to leave was often spurred by a very urgent need, a very imperative need for physical security. But moving to a new culture and perhaps a new language, it takes, as any of us who have ever moved, an incredible logistical leap. You become consumed with just needing to find housing, a community, a job, and all of those processes to resettle in a new place can be extremely isolating for newcomers. Some are fortunate to have family or friends to support the transition, but many don't. And tasks as simple as navigating public transport or finding out where to go for information and resources can take an incredible emotional and psychological load. Perhaps one of the things that I hear most commonly is a resulting crisis of identity that can come from displacement. For so many newcomers, including activists and peace builders, if they had education, if they were educated or working in a profession back home, including an esteemed profession in human rights or peace building, they can often find their credentials have to be reevaluated in a country of asylum. For some, that means suddenly having to find the funds to go back to school to pursue degrees that they've already completed and perhaps worked in professionally. For others, even if their official credentials may transfer, unofficially, they can encounter a lot of ignorance and unfamiliarity with the educational degrees they have, and uphill battles to seek employment and credibility in a new country. For peace building and the Women, Peace and Security agenda, there is virtually little to no formal recognition of peace builders in exile, which means that all of the structures that have been put in place over the last 25 years around engaging with women and communities in conflict are focused on peace builders who are largely in the countries experiencing conflict. So ironically, even when peace builders in the diaspora may be physically closer to perhaps Western political leaders, funders, decision-making centers, their ability to access those circles of power and decision-making can sometimes be even harder. And then there are the security risks. Working virtually to connect back home can expose both the activists themselves and their connections to surveillance, tracking, and even criminal charges, which can be levied both against themselves, should they ever travel, or to friends and family, and to their colleagues if they're connecting back home in the work that they do. So all three of the diaspora communities represented in this cohort from Afghanistan, Burma, and Iran have faced and are facing increasing pressures in this political environment. Their work, as I'm sure they will share much more eloquently, is becoming even more difficult than it already was. And as we see a backsliding of women's rights and support for international peace-building processes around the world, I think it is more important than ever that we are shining light on these transnational connections and finding ways to support the work that is occurring not only in countries of conflict, but also from the incredible activists that are doing that work around the world to support it. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to speak. I can't wait to hear the speakers today on the report. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jen, and thank you for being an incredible partner to us in this work and more broadly for the Women Peacemakers program at the IPJ. We're always grateful for you. Thanks for being with us. It's now my pleasure to introduce you all to our fellows and to the authors of our report. We'll have a panel of questions. We will allow you all in the audience to ask questions, so feel free to put it in that Q&A box as your questions pop up. It's my pleasure to introduce you to our three fellows, Sveta Mohammed Isak, Kay So, and Shadi Rushabaz, in a panel moderated by our lead author, Dr. Elena Stavdevska. Dr. Elena B. Stavdevska is a feminist peace scholar and lecturer in international relations at the University of Bristol. She has worked as a research consultant to support the Women Peacemaker Fellows over the last several years, and her research focuses on feminist and decolonial approaches to the political economy of peace and the politics of knowledge production in relation to the post-Yugoslav space. She'll be moderating our panel. And our three fellows. A peace builder and social justice advocate, Kay So has 2 decades of experience in public policy research, strategy development, and programming related to gender equality, labor migration, and women, peace, and security. She serves as an advisor to the Women Advocacy Coalition Myanmar as an ex officio member of the board of directors of the American Friends Service Committee. Shadi Rushabaz is an Iranian feminist researcher, peace builder, and futurist. She's a PhD candidate at the University of Melbourne and an associate research fellow at the Alfred Deakin Institute. With lived experience of migration across Iran, Italy, France, Tunisia, the US, and Australia, her work sits at the intersection of the futures of migration, gender, youth studies, and peace building. She has worked extensively in Euro-Mediterranean and Middle East affairs, collaborating with UN agencies and youth networks. She the founder of Peace Mentors, the first young women-led peacebuilding initiative in Iran. She also concluded her Next Generation Foresight Practitioners Fellowship in Nuclear Security at the School of International Futures in 2023. Her research connects the lived experience of individuals and their visions for the future with policy and decision makers. And last but not least, Sveta Mohammad Isfaq is an award-winning women's rights advocate, a TEDx speaker, and social entrepreneur from Afghanistan. Her work on national and international platforms has been instrumental in promoting unheard Afghan experiences and amplifying Afghan women's voices during the Taliban regime. She currently works on climate finance at EBRD and runs her gender justice nonprofit organization, Chadari. Welcome all. And Elena, I'll let you take it away with some of the panel questions.
Thank you, Brianna. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. I'm really, really excited to share this report with all of you. The report wouldn't have been what it is without all the people we've spoken with, who share their lived experiences and their tremendous knowledge with us. But primarily, it wouldn't have been what it is today without the 3 case studies that the whole report is shaped around. So I'm not going to take any time, and I'll let the leads of the case studies speak. Seto, let's start with you. Your case study focuses on Afghan women in the UK specifically, leading work to support women and peacebuilding efforts in Afghanistan through a range of humanitarian, educational, and advocacy-related efforts. Can you tell us a little bit about what kinds of challenges these diaspora women leaders face specifically?
Thank you, Elena, for the question, and thank you for USD and CROC IPG for this opportunity to produce this very critical research that is focused on the diaspora communities in the UK. So regarding our question, there are mainly 5 key challenges that the Afghan women in the diaspora communities are facing when advocating for Afghan women's rights, and that is security, misinformation, that is lack of unity, and also the capacity building and funding, as well as resettlement challenges. So the first key challenge that these women are facing is the security challenges. So security is that these peace builders have their families and colleagues in Afghanistan, and so they are concerned of their safety when advocating for their rights from the UK. Some NGOs, nonprofit organizations, they avoid publicity for safety reasons, so they don't promote their work on their website or social media for safety. And the Taliban restrictions on women's movements and reduced civic spaces present even additional challenges for women peace builders for their on-the-ground work. Another challenge related to that is internet access. So there's a limited internet access usually for women. There's this gender disparity, like the digital divide that is present. Misinformation is the second key challenge. And currently in Afghanistan, it is very, very difficult and very challenging to find accurate data. Because a lot of the people on the ground are hesitant to share their stories. They fear of being persecuted or arrested. So that is why it is very difficult to find the correct data. There are also misinformation from civilians, which is very interesting finding, I would say, from this report and research, is that sometimes the civilians accuse the Taliban of certain actions that they have not performed. Again, it's creating even more hurdles and challenges for the peace builders to conduct their work, to do their advocacy work. So the third challenge is the lack of unity. This is a very, very critical one, and I would like to emphasize that this is something that I have not seen in other research topics, and I think it's very important to mention how this lack of unity among the Afghan diaspora communities themselves creates challenges. So there are 2 types of this unities. This unity offline. So there is a lack of support among these diaspora communities. There's ethnicity-based attacks. There's a lot of blame game in gatherings, and also really focusing on the past problems and challenges rather than focusing on solutions. There's also online disunity, which is translated from into online hate and toxicity. And according to the Center for Information Resilience, online abuse targeting politically active women have tripled post-Taliban takeover since 2021. So these challenges, as a result, really weakens the credibility and result lack of attention from the West, which again is not helpful with the advocacy efforts that the diaspora community is trying to achieve. So funding and capacity building are other challenges. So due to the limited resources or deprioritization of Afghanistan, with the other conflicts in the world being prioritized. Afghan diaspora community are facing funding challenges, but also capacity building. Capacity building specifically on applying for grants. So there are some small organizations that are facing challenges of not being able to understand how to apply for grants because of lack of capacity. For example, the process is complex or lack of English language and these type of challenges. And sort of last but not least of the challenge that these women are facing is the resettlement challenges. So there are linguistic, legal, and health barriers. Afghan activists who came in 2021 are facing double challenge of advocating for the Afghan women's rights, as well as a challenge of really rebuilding their life in the new country. So these are some of the challenges that are the findings from my research. Thank you.
Thank you, Seta, and we'll come back to you to hear more about the case study. Now, moving on to Kay. Kay, your case study explored the work of diaspora women leaders from Myanmar, Burma, living in the U.S., and it highlighted both formal and informal work done to build peace in Burma, Myanmar. Can you tell us a little bit about the strategies that these diaspora women peacebuilders use to make an impact?
Thank you, Eleanor, for your question. I love talking about strategies. So when we talk about peace building in Myanmar, we often picture those brave people on the ground, rightfully so. But there's also another powerful, often invisible front line, the diaspora. So these are the women who fled persecution, yet continue to mobilize, organize, and lead their organizations across time zones, continents, showing that peace doesn't stop at borders. From fundraising in Buffalo to advocacy events in New York, mediating across the divided political lines, these women's peace builders have turned their exile into agency. They use every skill they brought to the United States: advocacy, mediations, community organizing, resource mobilizations, to keep the struggle for peace alive. So our research discovered a series of strategies, but we would like to share with you 3 strategies. The first strategy is leveraging comparative strengths. They each come with different comparative strengths and skills. These women are strategic. They link into what they do best. People with experience advocating for United Nations and international organizations, they push for their agenda at CSW, Women, Peace and Security's high-level debate week in New York, UN headquarters, Human Rights Council. But those with financial skills or finance professionals turn their expertise into fundraising engine, moving resources directly to the communities in need back home. And the social organizers provide peer-to-peer support, mentoring news arrival, helping other people to open bank account in the United States, keeping hope alive in the host communities. And the second strategy is around the gender inclusions in the governance and security sectors of future Burma. Even from afar, they are shaping Myanmar's federal democratic future. They have drafted the gender position paper for National Unity Consultative Council, advice on the developments of preventative sexual violence and exploitations and abuse policy. And some of them have been contributing overnight because of the time difference to the drafting process of federal transitional arrangement documents. So they are doing this in order to cement gender sensitivities and civilians' protections in the defense forces codes of conduct. So they will be adherents to international humanitarian and human rights law in times of warfare. And they do all these things with very scarce resources. They are trying to educate the armed actors on CRSVs, war crimes. At the same time, they are providing services to the survivors, to the nearest service providers. So they are in one continuum doing service provisions, preventions, and justice, something even international agencies often fail to do. And the third strategies that our research found out is they are very skillful at building intra and transnational women's networks and building movements. Distance hasn't weakened their networks, but it strengthened them. Across continents, women coordinate emergency relocations of high-risk activists to relocate from Burma to safety, mobilize funds for IDPs populations, children's schools, response to gender-based violence cases within hours through encrypted messaging. So this web of women from inside Myanmar and across diaspora have become a lifeline of protection and 24-hour solidarity system. They often fund out of their own pockets. So it is really incredible that their mobilizations also crosses ethnic lines. So we've got in United States, the Karen, the Kachin, Burma, the Rohingyas, Chin communities coming together under one call for justice and just peace. So to conclude, the strategies are incredibly impressive. And what we're witnessing here is not just diaspora activism only, it's beyond activism, it's diaspora diplomacy. These women are not waiting for permissions. They are not working in silo. They are weaving together accountability, advocacy, and compassion across borders. So peace is not only the lack of conflict. Peace is also the presence of such women who refuse to be silent, even when they are in the United States or anywhere in the world. So.
Thank you very much, Kay. I love this notion of keeping hope alive. Also, because I think it's a nice segue into the third case study. Shadi, your case study looks forward. I mean, all of the case studies in many ways look forward, but your focus is on looking forward. So it focuses specifically on how women leaders in Iran and the Iranian diaspora in Australia view a peaceful future for Iran. Tell us more about these visions of these women leaders and how they intersect.
Thank you so much, Elena, for the question. I'm joining you today from the land of the Darug people, otherwise known as Parramatta near Sydney, Australia. It's a bit late, so please bear with my delayed responses to such a big impact question, because when we think about the future, not just in Iran, and I'm guessing with my co-fellows, we've had ample opportunity to think about visions of individuals, we aren't really talking about one single trajectory. And I think each and any one of us who worked in this space or works in this space has learned in the span of the last year that everything can change very quickly from a future that we've advocated for and tried to change for more than, I guess, quarter of a century. So what I found, I guess, in my discussions and really deep heart-to-heart chats with other fellow Iranian change makers, especially the women, obviously, that I met, but also those who were there behind the Zoom screen, thanks to my lovely research assistant who is on this chat on the Zoom, was that despite the challenges, and there are many challenges for Iranian women peace builders, like much other difficulties that they experience in their lives, there is a vision of hope that is alive. And in their work on Iran, whether it's from inside the country or across the borders, all of the visions really can be summarized in what we pretty much all decided to call an ordinary life, or a vision for the restoration of an ordinary life. And take ordinary life as you will, because there are things that we take for granted when we move beyond borders, and then there are things that we lose at the same time. And there is some form of subjectivity around it, of course, because each person has an individual take to life. But there are also, I guess, more common themes that are not just limited to the visions of Iranian women, but I suppose to women all around the world. And some of these visions for the future for Iran, whether it was from the diaspora or inside the country, which is, by the way, interesting to know that there are a lot of overlapping themes despite the location where these women were. They included themes like freedom from state and social violence, which included, I guess, policing of women's bodies and movement. So we know essentially where you can go and how you can go. Their human dignity, so your essential rights, and being, I guess, humiliated for certain restrictions on you, access to quality education, to work, to public spheres. Justice and accountability, that was another very important theme coming out, especially with regards to anything that had to do with gender-based violence or persecution. And social connection came out a lot, to be free to connect with families, with loved ones who are no longer in exile, or who are not in prison, or who are not in a far remote corner out of the world, whether by choice or by force. And the thing that really took me by surprise was joy, and that sense of everyday happiness that comes obviously very close to our culture, which is known to be a culture of, I like to think, happy people finding a lot of excuses to celebrate and eat, which I think everyone pretty much unanimously said that they have been robbed of it. And I guess being a woman, you feel that not just as an individual, but also as half of the society, if not more, feels this deeply political sense of being somber and joyless. So as you may also see in the illustrations that came out as part of our report, I can just pretty much summarize that peace in Iran, or visions for peace in the future of Iran, came out in everyday lived experience and in collective action. It was definitely not negotiated only in elite spaces, like, I guess, CSW or lobbying with governments or NGOs. And the thing that I really like to highlight is that everything within the context of this research pointed out to incremental change, which means that everyday slow process of rebuilding the social contract, or in this case, potentially creating a new social contract where our state actually protects its women rather than persecuting them. It's also important to note that, or at least I like to note that, these visions were not very much for women in the silo, but it portrayed the future of a country where the precondition for having a peaceful future required participation of every single individual, regardless of their gender or age, regardless of where they're based, inside or outside the borders, to make sure that we have that, liveliness and joy that we as Iranian women desire.
Indeed. Thank you, Shadi. very, very important. All of the three contributions are fantastic. And I really hope that the audience members and others who couldn't join us today really appreciate and dive into the case studies, which are tremendously rich, and we cannot do them justice really in 5 minutes. But I want to ask a question now to all three of you. Given that you completed the data collection in 2024, and a lot has happened in the world in the meantime, to put it mildly, could you tell us a little bit about how the context, the challenges, as well as the opportunities, of course, have changed for the different diaspora communities? Maybe a couple of minutes each. Sveta, let's start with you.
Yeah. Thank you, Elena, for the question. So since the data collection in 2024, the context of the Afghan diaspora communities, particularly Afghan women activists in the UK, has changed in different ways. So first, we have to be clear, and everybody, I'm sure, is aware that Afghanistan remains is the only country in the world where girls and women are banned from secondary higher education, most employment, and also public life. So the Taliban continue to issue restrictions, and there has been no significant policy change on women's rights. And second is international attention and aid for Afghanistan have decreased. UK bilateral aid to Afghanistan, which has already fallen by about 47% between 2022 and 2024, has not returned to earlier levels. And as global crises such as the war in Ukraine and conflicts in the Middle East has taken priority. And this reduction has affected the ability of sort of Afghan-led organizations in the UK to access funding. And the third is that the digital security challenges have increased. The Taliban restrictions on internet access, as you might have heard the news a few months ago, that there was a internet ban all across the country for a few days, and surveillance have made the communities sort of between the diaspora and women in Afghanistan more difficult. And Afghan NGOs again report ongoing barriers to collect data and coordinate projects inside the country. So things are becoming more difficult. However, at the same time, Afghan activists are continuing their advocacy work, providing educational programs, advocating at international platforms and forums, and providing support at the local and community level. So yeah, overall, between 2024 2025, these are some of the changes.
Okay, thank you, Sveta. Kay, what about your case?
Actually, it's not very good news. Today, peacebuilding work is a lot harder and riskier than ever before with the rapid changing context. And as we all know, women's peacebuilder and diaspora's efforts are powered by already very fragile funding string, often tied to WPS agenda and framework. And those fundings are drying up as we witness the USAID and other cuts or other governments redirecting gender equality funding. A lot of local women's rights organizations and women's rights organizations in conflict zones hit hardest. And these are the types of organizations that the women's peacebuilders that I've interviewed and we highlight in our research paper, or they partner with such organizations in the conflict zones. Meanwhile, the world is spending, 2.7 trillions on weapons, and less than 1% go to the WROs, women's rights organizations, for gender-based violence preventions and services. So it is very painful paradox. It seems that money flow freely for war, but barely trickles for peace now. So not a lot of opportunity in terms of institutional support, but opportunities, as small as they are, there's still are some women, peace and security champion member states still trying to provide some sort of ODA to such small programming. And the women that I've interviewed, they keep going. They still fill the gaps, keep community connected, and they show peace, not powers, is the strength of a nation. And they really believe in that approach. Peace, not power, is the strength of nations. So that's the opportunity, I would say.
Okay, thank you, Kay. And Shadi?
Well, when we were collecting data in around April 2024, I was really concerned because there were some militarized tensions between Iran and Israel, and then that impacted obviously my own research and data collection in terms of safety and security. But like a year and a half after we've actually had war for 12 days between these two countries, and of course a number of other diplomatic and non-diplomatic escalations all around the region in which Iran has been involved. So things like this, including the return of sanctions on Iran, have direct impacts on the life of every individual. And it doesn't matter whether you're a citizen of another country or whether you're still living in Iran and feel extremely trapped and crushed by these changes that make you feel extremely pressured. So internally and externally, the landscape has changed. And of course, my colleagues have given a beautiful snapshot on the state of the world. So whatever small bits of funding that we used to be able to access and difficultly get into a country that is completely detached from the international banking system has already become even more difficult to obtain. There has been more suppression on the diaspora. So recently, the Iranian embassy here in Australia was pretty much shut down, and diplomats got expelled because of security threats and things that unfortunately have, after a long time, reminded other countries that normalizing relationships with a regime that does not hold mercy to its own citizens is actually not a good idea. But on another, I guess, more positive note, if I may, digital diplomacy has been growing very strongly because where do you do the work when you can't do it on the ground, or internationally you do it online? And women have organized across international and local international networks. And there's a lot of security, especially digital security literacy, happening, which I think is great. The diaspora remains fragmented, and in some cases, the fragmentation after the Women Life Freedom movement has actually become heartbreaking. But it also shows a healthy trajectory for any democratic transition process. So, generational and political plurality brings some hope in my heart. And most importantly, I think human rights documentation and documentation of gender-based violence and femicide is getting much stronger by day. And I think for the collective memory to be, sort of dedicated to these acts, it's actually remarkable. So yeah, I think there's the good news and there's the bad news. But I think I'll tie it back to the fact that that's why I really like the future visions, because everything that has changed in the last year and a half since we began this fellowship and data collection indicates that the need for those visions to become true is becoming even more important and significant, despite such drastic changes in the bigger landscape.
Okay, thank you, Shadi. Thank you to the audience members who've already asked questions. And just a reminder that we're now starting the Q&A. So if you have any questions that popped up as you were listening to our fantastic fellows, please drop them in the Q&A box so we can pick them up. So the first question is for Kay. Kay, what resources are most helpful for Burmese women peacemakers in the diaspora communities within the US to help them overcome some of the obstacles, some that you mentioned, but also some others that are there in the report? And how can we support them? And where do you think a peace studies peace studies student can contribute?
I already responded privately to this question, but I can say it again here. As a peace study student, I would highly recommend you to get in touch with some of the key women's diaspora network that are existing in the country. I'd be happy to be a conduit for you to get introduced to these network, and they will appreciate new peace study students providing support to help mobilize and organize efforts and campaign activities. Also, if you are have access to a diplomatic channel or decision makers, you can also highlight some of the key needs that women's peace builders are really hoping to accomplish in the next month or so is the extensions of temporary protection status in United States. The temporary protection status is due to expire in end of November. So if you are U.S. citizens, you may want to call up to your representative to in support of this TPS to be extended for Myanmar peoples in diaspora situations and who are on such immigration status.
Right. Thank you, Kay. I think it's useful to also share it with the whole audience. So thank you for answering it live as well as typing it in the chat. And now, so all three of you kind of touched on the point of digital activism, the importance of digital activism, but also some of the challenges and the threats that come with it. And so we have a question in the chat. Given that many diaspora peace builders rely on digital activism, as you well noted, but they face online harassment and surveillance, what is your thinking around possible long-term strategies that could balance visibility, safety, as well as the sustainability of these digital movements? Anyone can answer. So this is it's not specifically directed to anyone, or rather, it's directed to everyone. I also understand that this is a question that is kind of difficult to answer at the moment. But if you have any emerging thoughts, that would also be welcome. Shadi.
I can go there. I mean, I personally have had a lot of unpleasant experiences with myself as someone who navigates the space. I think when we think and talk about long-term strategies, it's the whole, like, how we say it takes a village to raise a child. Like, it takes a whole set of policies, it takes a whole set of practices, what I now call digital hygiene, even, if that makes sense. And I think one of the things that, and with the obviously with now the AI wave, or the AI craze that we love and obviously hate at the same time, and deep fakes and stuff like that, it's getting much scarier. To me, it's a 360 approach. Like, you have to work on mental health and resilience from one side, but you also at the same time have to look at prevention as to, is everything safe on your device, and what are the basic principle things that, applications or firewalls or stuff like that you use. And I think that also comes with, how do you back up data? Like, I know most of the people that I interviewed have multiple Instagram accounts, for example. If one gets hacked or reported, they pretty much use the backup space. And yeah, as Elena said, there is no easy and straightforward answer, but I think I can just summarize it at online harassment and surveillance, depending on who it comes from. Sometimes it's the states themselves. I have actually reaching out for opportunity emails, which I did not respond to during the last year, because I knew that these were not very well intentioned. I think it all comes down to being really strategic. And also, I think these happen because there is no consequence for it. Like, everyone can sit behind an anonymous account and say whatever they want to say. So discrediting that person's, agency, in making me feel like I'm having a bad day is the first step for me. to move there. But yeah, and exchanging lessons between contexts is very important, because sometimes, you know, certain diaspora groups are much more advanced, and others can learn from them.
Yep. Thank you, Shadi. And it's actually, I should note also, it's been beautiful to see the three of you exchanging experiences and advice throughout the whole fellowship and after. So you are a living kind of an embodiment of the advice you just shared. So there's another question in the Q&A, but we're slowly moving towards wrapping up the event. So I'll ask the question together with another question. The question from the audience is, how do we get the message to the funders to highlight the need to invest in preventing violence? And then the broader question, so you can address this question as part of the broader question if you want. The broader question is, what do you think the international community should do better to support diaspora women peace builders? You've offered a whole set of recommendations in the case studies, but give us a little bit of a teaser, so to say, for those who are with us here today.
I'll answer,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, anyone can
Yes,
start. Sorry. Okay, go
Yeah,
ahead.
about preventions, because thank you, Jane, for these questions. Actually, it's not easy. A donor tend to, sorry if there are donors in the participants here, donors tend to work in silo. That's a reality. But knowing some of the peace builders who are leading national organizations back in Burma, national networks or women's organizations, these are also very strong personality go-getters. So they continuously negotiate with donor why prevention is most cost-effective and prevention is better than cure. But it is a common sense, but it's not that easy to get the message across, because this funding is coming from this pot of money for response. This money is coming from this part, from this string of document collections and evidence gathering. So you have to go and go across these different silo artificial walls that women's peace builders are constantly navigating through, advocating the donor communities about in this current context of Burma's educating and preventing the resistant forces is very important for providing these people with education on international human rights law and humanitarian law, so future atrocity can be prevented, so the grievance will not build up, and then in the post-conflict time, there will not be a further fragmentations of conflicts and violence. So these are the messagings that some of these women's peace builders are advocating to the donor communities. And another one is, at this point in time, how can we suggest the member states? We just have to keep highlighting to the member states that, you know, the work of women's peace builders are not just feel goods, not inspiring. Actually, it is cost saving and it prevents future violence. And we are celebrating the 25th anniversary of the Women's Peace and Security Agenda. At this point, we shouldn't be talking about the diminishing funds and the rolling backs on women's rights at the global level.
Right. Thank you, Kay. Okay, maybe 1 minute each, Sveta and then Shadi to wrap us up.
Yes, thank you very much. So just going back to the previous question on the digital security, I think that relates to the recommendation that I would definitely have for the international organizations to provide digital security trainings for Afghan women and diaspora communities. To know the tactics and tools to be used to stay safe online. That's something that there's a gap. So about the recommendations. So I have 3 sets of recommendations for diaspora communities, activist civil society, for the international organizations and UK government. So I'll give 1 recommendations for each so that we are short on time. So for civil society, it's very important to build a strong UK-based networks through associations, events, and collaboration to continue the work and to continue to engage with each other and to work together. For international organizations, one practical recommendation is to offer grant writing and capacity building training for activists, especially for those local organizations that don't have the capacity or don't speak English or don't know how to navigate the complex processes. For UK government is establish a consultative process to include Afghan society's voices in the policy making and funding. Those are some of my recommendations. Thank you.
Very concise. Thank you, Sveta. Shadi, over to you.
Thank you. I think the simple way to go with this is, and I see a last question in the chat about navigating anti-migrant sentiments, which I believe all of our research goes and ties hand in hand with. In addition to what my colleagues have said, I think recognizing that women diaspora and also women inside countries are highly vulnerable and treating them according to their vulnerability, that's definitely a member state recommendation, because we can't move forward if we know women are not safe at home or in their, I guess, host countries. And of course, the visa barriers that exist for women to go and speak and to share messages, and of course to save themselves. One recommendation that I would like to also highlight is mental health and well-being support, because that's largely lost. And as donors silo, and therapy is expensive, like especially when you're speaking another language and you're left alone in another country. So that trauma-informed approaches. And last, I guess, but not least, beyond the question of financing and I guess systemic support, I think just being open to multifactional diaspora communities. Because I know that certain governments only engage with certain groups and that's their strategic approach. But without, plural and diverse consultations, the foreign policy or country information or things like that cannot advance. And women diaspora, regardless of what vision they have for the future of a country, are experts and they're not simply observers in exile. So yeah, connecting them in the networks and supporting those networks for a more peaceful future, I think is paramount, whether you're a civil society taking this recommendation, a donor, or a member state representative.
Perfect. Thank you, Shadi. Thank you all for sharing your insights. Thank you to the audience for all the questions, for all the praise, all the very well-deserved praise, I should say, also for the fellows. And Brianna, there's a last question in the chat about where we find the report. So I'll give that over to you then.
Perfect. Thank you so much, friend in the audience, for setting me up for that. I know we're a little bit over our time, so I'll be quick. Thank you so much to our fellows for speaking today. Thank you so much for Jen Freeman for being with us, and Elena, to you for moderating our panel and supporting this work throughout the years. As Jen and Kay both noted, we're celebrating the 25th anniversary of the Women, Peace, and Security field, and we're proud to offer this research that focuses on the reality of this work for women peacebuilders in the diaspora. This fellowship, the Women PeaceMakers Fellowship, has been around for 23 of the 25 years of the official WPS agenda, and we're dedicated to continuing to push for support and respect for women peacebuilders around the world. I also want to flag that we're hosting another event this Thursday at the same time, specifically focused on that 25th anniversary. So if you want to come back and spend a little bit more time with us this week, we'll have an event specific to that. You can use this QR code or check out our website or any of our social media that I've listed there. Up on our website, we have the full report, an executive summary, and the standalone case studies. In the future, we'll also be providing translated studies in Burmese, Dari, and Farsi. Thank you all so much for joining us together. And again, a huge thanks to our fellows and our speakers. As our speakers shared today, this work continues even in the face of enormous challenges, including a dwindling funding environment and a rise in violence. As Kay said, women peacebuilders are not waiting for permission, not working in silos, and they're investing in creating change now and also planning for the long term. So thank you for being part of this work and part of this community as we think long-term about how to build more peaceful societies. Thank you for your support of this work, and thank you for being with us today.